This is how I get my vocal from sounding like this
Smoking these packs now I feel like I'm flying, God.
to sounding like this.
I do not lie, broken my heart but you won't see me crying, God.
What's good? Junior NRB from Studio 23 Records, and I've been working in the music industry for over 8 years now. I used to try and learn how to mix from YouTube, but one thing I always noticed was the mixing tutorials under-explaining and over-complicating everything. So in this video, I want to break down vocal mixing in the most simplest way that I can, using a concept I made called the 4 C's. Every vocal mix I do can be broken down into 4 stages: cleaning, compression, clarity, and creative effects. And once you have that, you'll have everything you need to know to learn to mix. You just gotta practice. The first thing I'm gonna do is level the vocal to the beat.
Smoking these packs now I feel like I'm flying, God. I think I can fly.
And that brings us to the first C, cleaning. One thing that took me years to realize because nobody explained it to me was the order of your plugins matter. Think of it like washing a car. You wouldn't polish it before you've cleaned all the dirt off first. Using Autotune, the first thing you've got to do is find the key of your beat. We can find that using this website here called TuneBat. You literally just drag your beat in there and it will tell you the key. Now let's hear the vocal with no Autotune and then we'll turn it on.
Pick up my phone now you think that I'm lying.
And now on.
I do not lie, broken my heart but you won't see me crying, God.
Already that makes a big difference. The next plugin I'm gonna add is noise suppression. Noise is basically any unwanted room sounds that you might have. I use Waves NS1, but if you're on Logic, you can use the Noise Gate plugin. You can use the Fruity limiter in gate mode, or in Ableton and Pro Tools, you have a plugin called Gate.
Someone into 2, trip on them, gotta fill up the coupe, smoking there while I'm...
You might not have even heard the difference then, because this step isn't always necessary, but when it is needed, it makes a massive difference. After that, I use an EQ. An EQ lets you control certain frequencies of the sound.
I think I can fly.
There's a lot of low frequencies and not too many high frequencies. We're gonna take out some of the bass of the vocal because that's gonna be clashing with the kick and the bass in the beat. Remove up to about 100 hertz.
These packs now I feel like I'm flying.
And next, we'll then scoop some frequencies out of around the 300 hertz range. Because this is just where I find always a muddy part of people's vocal.
Got my phone now you think that I'm lying. I do not lie.
We then also might add some high end in there just to make that vocal have a little bit more clarity. Before,
and you know I'm the truth. Ain't got no weed that gon' fuck up my mood.
After,
Louis Vuitton got her looking so cute. Ain't going broke, I turn 1 into 2.
These are all small differences that we make. All these small differences, plugin by plugin, is what makes a big difference at the end. Optional step. I like to use this plugin, Silk Vocal. It's not a necessity, but it helps to clean up that vocal even more. So this is step 1, cleaning, kind of done. Let's listen back to how it sounded before we did any cleaning at all.
Smoking these packs now I feel like I'm flying, God. I think I can fly. Fuck up my mood. Louis Vuitton got her looking so cute. Ain't going broke, I turn 1 into 2.
The second C is compression. Compression is basically controlling the volume. When people record naturally, certain words are gonna come out louder than others. It might be like, yo, 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 yo. But we're not gonna want them to all sound different volume. We need them to all sound the same volume. On my vocal chain, I normally use 2 compressors. The first compressor lightly tames that vocal and helps to control it a little bit. The second compressor adds more control, but also adds warmth and character to the vocal. The first compressor I use is normally the stock Logic compressor, and I put it on the studio vocal preset here. It's important you do not just copy settings and think that those are the magic settings that are gonna work. These are just starting points. I normally start with the attack at about 12 milliseconds. The attack is how fast the compressor kicks in. Aggressive rap vocals may have a slower attack, whereas a smooth singing track may have a faster attack. I start my threshold at about -23 dB. Threshold is the volume level at which the compressor starts to work. For example, once the vocal reaches minus 23 dB, that's when the compressor starts to work. I would start with my release somewhere around 100 milliseconds. Release controls how long does it take for the compressor to stop working. So a slow release would sound more smooth, whereas a fast release would make it more aggressive and punch. And now ratio, I would keep at about 2.5 to 1 to start with. The ratio is basically how much compression do we use. This ratio of 2.5 to 1 would be relatively light because we just want to tame the vocal a little bit for this first compressor. Whereas if I was mixing the ad-libs now, I would maybe put it to 5 to 1 because that's going to be heavy compression that makes those vocals sit in the background a bit more. I use the stock Logic compressor. FL, you can use the Fruity compressor or the compressor on Ableton, Pro Tools, the DYN3 compressor. So once that vocal has been tamed lightly, we'll add our second compressor, the LA2A. This compressor is so easy to use, it's just two knobs. Like, you just up the compression with this one. When you up the compression, it will make the volume of the vocal go quieter. So you up it with the gain, listen.
Smoking these packs now, I feel like I'm flying. I think I can fly.
Let's listen to how the vocals sounded before we did any cleaning and compressing.
Smoking these packs now, I feel like I'm flying. I think I can fly. I do not lie. Broken my heart, but you won't see me crying.
The third C, clarity. Once the vocal has been cleaned and compressed, this is where we can start making it shine. This is the point where it starts to sound more expensive and professional. There are two main plugins that I use for clarity, and that would be Fresh Air and a Pultec EQ. Fresh Air is an amazing plugin for adding crispness to the vocal.
Pick up my phone, now you think that I'm lying. I do not lie. Broken my heart, but you won't see me crying.
Now, a Pultec EQ looks confusing, but it's actually really simple. You choose the frequencies you want to affect with the high frequency and low frequency dials. When we're mixing vocals, let's not worry about the low frequency. We'll just focus on the high frequency. I'd set it anywhere between 5,000 and 12,000 kilohertz, depending on the vocal that you're mixing. We choose the bandwidth to affect how wide of an area are we gonna boost or reduce.
Smoking these packs now, I feel like I'm flying. I think I can fly.
You should hear even more clarity now. Let's listen to no clarity.
Smoking these packs now, I feel like I'm flying. I think I can fly. Pick up my phone, now you think that I'm lying. I do not lie.
This is where it starts to sound sick. I use a Waves Pultec EQ, but there's so many free ones and stock ones, so you can use whatever. We're gonna go back to cleaning. This is an important one to remember. Some of those harsh frequencies you took out at the start are now gonna be much more noticeable. I would use a de-esser to help control some of that sibilant sounds. We can sidechain it to find out whereabouts is that harsh S sound and look for the different frequencies. Normally somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 hertz.
Ain't going broke, I don't want it.
That's remove some of that sibilant sounds. And then finally on our vocal chain, we may add another EQ just to, again, clean it up a little bit.
To do fucking with me, they ain't fucking with you. Bro used to trap out Mercedes-Benz.
Why I like the FabFilter Pro Q3 or Pro Q4 is because of the capability of dynamic EQ, which means it's only gonna take out them frequencies when they get too loud. I can even do de-essing using this EQ. If I find the harsh frequency,
got no friends, if I ever go broke, I'ma do it again.
So now our vocal is sounding nice, clean, compressed and clear. This leads us to the fourth C, creative effects. This one's probably my favorite. I usually put each of these on a bus. Reverb, delay, saturation, and stereo width. You could put these plugins directly on your vocal chain, but having them on a bus makes them way easier to control and blend. Reverb creates space. It can make your vocal sound like you're in a massive cathedral, a small room, or even like a crazy dreamy ambient space. If you're mixing hard rap vocals, you might only put a little touch of reverb. But if you're mixing beautiful singing auto-tune vocals, a big reverb can sound mad.
Like I'm flying, I think I can fly. Pick up my phone, now you think that I'm lying.
A tip with reverb is to max it out and then dial it back until it sounds about right. For my reverb, I'm using Valhalla Vintage Verb. This is an amazing reverb, but you can use any that your DAW has. Bus 2, delay. Delay is basically like repeating echoes of your vocal. This helps fill empty spaces in the mix and can help make vocals feel wider and more atmospheric. Bus 3, saturation. This adds warmth and thickness to the vocal. For my saturation, I use Saturn 2 by FabFilter.
Ain't going broke, I turn 1 into 2. Trip on them, gotta fill up the coupe. Smoking there while I'm lying my zoo. Give it to me, cause I know what to do.
You might just want a little bit of this. Finally, bus 4, stereo width. This makes your vocal feel wider and not get stuck in the middle of the mix. For my stereo width plugin, I like to use the Waves Doubler 4. But again, there's so many alternatives.
Bro used to trap out Mercedes Benz, got locked when he's free, he's gonna do it again.
So now I've taught you through this vocal chain. Let's go back and listen again with nothing on and hear how it sounds afterwards.
I can fly and pick up my phone.
I will add the plugins in one by one.
I do not lie, broken my heart, but you won't see me crying, girl. I ain't got the time, hop in this coupe and you know that I'm sliding. You know I'm a slide, girl, I ain't lying, you know I'm the truth. Ain't got no weed, I gon' fuck up my mood.
The difference is night and day. I hope you've been able to follow what I said well, but I know that by using this concept of the 4 C's, you can develop your own method to mixing. This is just something I've made by myself in a way that I found mixing easy to understand. They always say engineers should train their ears. But what does that mean when you don't know what to listen for? Breaking it down into these 4 C's should help you. You'll probably start to understand whether there's an issue in the mix with how clean it is, or if it's just a little bit boring and dry. You know that you're missing creative effects. Like in this tutorial, I have used some expensive third-party plugins, but you can find free alternatives. Or if you drop us a message on Instagram, then I'll show you how to get some of these plugins for free. Just don't tell the feds, yeah? Thank you for watching. Drop a like, a subscribe and a comment if this helped you. And come back for more tutorials or good content, man. Even book in a session with us. If you can't be bothered to learn to mix, well, you can get your songs mixed and mastered at Studio 23. So yeah, man, this has been NRB signing out.